Hi pentathletes, welcome back to another video about Pony Club Tetrathlon. In this video, I'll examine how the scoring system for Tetrathlon is applied in competition and suggest what event might be most important to you and how you can improve performance. In this first part of the video, I'll examine the general distribution of scores, so feel free to skip through it. In the second part though, I identify which sport is most important for each age and gender, and I highly recommend having a look at that to see how you can tailor your training. This data is based on about 100 athletes in Tetrathlon events in Victoria in 2018 and 2019. Due to this small sample size, especially in the junior and senior males, these trends may not be representative of the spread of all athletes. First up, the riding. This top diagram shows us the scores received by athletes broken down by age and gender. As you can see, these are extremely negatively skewed across all age groups, with the greater spread among the younger age groups. However, we get a far better idea with the spread through this frequency histogram. You can see this distribution is bimodal. That means the score is centered around 2 points, which are 0 and 1,400. In sub-juniors, just under 50% of riders are between the 1,300 and 1,400, with the remainder obviously down the bottom. And for juniors, it's around 60%, and seniors, it's a bit over 45%. However, there are slightly more riders in the lower score range, 0 to 700, in sub-juniors of 33%, compared to juniors, 11%, and seniors, 21%. This suggests that most riders are either going mostly clear or getting eliminated pretty much immediately, and the latter lose almost any chance of being placed, with over 1,000-point deficit to their opponents. This means that nailing the riding is super important. Here we can see the distribution of scores in the shooting phase. These are a fairly normal distribution for all age groups with some slight variations. These frequency histograms for each age group demonstrate that the distribution is indeed normal for juniors and seniors, though there seems to be quite a few outliers in the sub-juniors. This data illustrates that seniors receive the best scores with a mode of 700 to 800 and a median of 737, which is expected as they are the most experienced athletes. They're followed by sub-juniors, who are the least experienced, but they're shooting from a shorter distance of 7 metres and using both hands. So they've got a mode of 613 to 713 and a median of 605. Naturally, juniors come last with a mode of 469 to 569 and median 523.5 because they're mostly both quite inexperienced and from a further distance. We can also notice that the spread of scores with an IQR of 280 for juniors, 274.25 for sub-juniors and 226 for seniors, indicating that the better the overall performance of athletes, the lower the spread of scores and hence the less importance of this event. The scores for running tend towards the normal distribution, with the exception of sub-junior males, which have a significant positive screw, but this might just be less pronounced in a larger sample size. What is noticeable about running is the large spread of scores. For sub-juniors, this is somewhat apparent, with an IQR of 315 compared to 239 in the shooting for the boys, and while girls are 330 for both. However, in juniors, there becomes a significant discrepancy in spread, with an IQR of 693 compared to 318 in shooting for males, and 648 compared to 302 in females. That's twice as much variation. It's also worth noting that for junior females, the under 20 category goes down to negative 700 if it wasn't for the 20-point cutoff. Swimming is the opposite of running. The scores do look very high, but the spread is actually very small compared to that of running and shooting. For example, sub-junior female swim scores have an IQR of 162 compared to 315 in the run. In junior females, there's an IQR of 262 in the swim compared to 648 in the run, or pretty much a third of the variation, and hence probably like half as important as an event. Now, looking at the importance of events. As the result in tetrathlon is determined by the total score, the variation in each individual event will directly correlate to variation in total score. Hence, by examining the relative measures of spread, we can approximate the significance of each event in overall placing. The tetrathlon rules state that, ideally, each of the running, swimming and shooting phases should have an equal influence on the final result, with the riding phase carrying slightly more weight. So let's look at 4 measures of spread for each category and see how well they reflect these goals. For sub-junior males, the most important event is riding, contributing 63% to the spread of scores by IQR with an average of 54% contribution across all metrics. The second most important is running, with 16% of the variation in IQR and 24% of the variation in range, with an average contribution of 19%. The third most important event is the shooting, with an average contribution of 16% across all metrics. The least important event is the swimming, with only 8% of the variation in IQR and an average contribution of 11%. In sub-junior females, the most important event is riding, contributing 50% of the variation in IQR, standard deviation and average deviation, and 43% of the range. The second most important event is a tie between shooting and running, with 20% of the variation IQR and average deviation. However, the shooting is minutely higher, so shooting takes second and running takes a close third. Once again, swimming is the least important, with 10% of the variation in all metrics. In the junior male category, the highest contribution to IQR goes to running with 37%. However, the ride leads in all other measured spreads, so riding can still be said to be the most important. In second place is the run, with 27% of the variation in both standard and average deviation, as well as range. Third place goes to swimming, with an average contribution of 21% of the spreader scores, the highest so far. In last place is the shooting, with only 15 to 17% of the contribution across all metrics. For junior females, the running is the most important event, contributing 49% of the spread in IQR and around 40% in all other metrics. The ride comes in second, with 32% of the variation in standard deviation range and an average contribution of 25%. Third place is shooting, with around 19% of the variation in score. Finally is swimming, with up to 20% of the variation in IQR, but only 10% of the range, for an average contribution of 14%. For the senior males, running is once again the most important event, contributing to nearly 40% of the spread in all metrics. Second most influential is shooting, consisting 27% of the variation in score on average. Third ranked is the riding, with 21% of the spread measured by IQR, standard deviation, and average deviation. Finally is swimming, with only 16% of the variation in score. Finally, we have the senior females, where the most important event is riding, with 40% of the variation by standard and average deviation, though it ties with running at 32% of the range, and is beaten by the contribution of 44% IQR running. This, along with around 30% of the contribution to other measures of spread, puts running in second place of importance. Third is shooting, with 17 to 22% of the spreader scores, and in last place is the swimming, with only 13% of the contribution to the variation scores on average. So overall, what event is the most important? Well, while the numbers may show differently, I think we can confidently rank riding as the most important event, as it is incredibly punishing if you can't get around the course, though once athletes are completing the course, it fades in significance score-wise. But the threat of losing so many points means that I believe the scoring system succeeds in its goal of weighting riding slightly more heavily than the other disciplines. The shooting, while not manipulated outside of the computer system, seems to achieve the intended score contribution of around 20% in most age groups, and hence, overall, it is worthwhile for athletes to make some effort to improve it for the higher scores and overall placings. Where the scoring system for this sport breaks down is in the run and swim, with running contributing around twice as much to the variation score as swimming. This could be rectified by slightly decreasing the rate of change in scores for the run and increasing them in the swim, especially in juniors and seniors. However, until this gets changed, it's probably worth paying particular attention to your running training if you're trying to improve your placing. Well, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed and found it useful. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more information about pentathlon in Oz.